Hari Om, Shankara ji.
Hari Om, Hari Om. Good to see you this morning, Balakrishna ji. Good morning, Cindy. Namaste.
Oh, I had my audio muted. I did say good morning and namaste. Sorry. Here, okay.
Figured as much. I saw you talking, but I didn't see you. Didn't hear you.
Okay. I'm going to mute myself now.
So far, it's just the three of us, you, Balakrishna, and myself.
Well, we have 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah. It's a glorious morning out there.
It is that, indeed.
I enjoyed my walk this morning.
Ah, good. Yay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. If I did not get a chance to connect with Uma, if she has trouble getting on, I'm going to log off and call her.
Okay.
So,
Very good.
yeah.
Namaste, Keith.
Namaste. Brother Shankara, Balakrishna. Cindy, good morning.
Hi, Keith.
I missed last week's Realizing God class. Where are we in the text?
We're just close to the end of the Buddha talk. The line that I'll start with is first is right view. So it's after the description of the...
Shankara ji, it is on page 156.
156, thank you so very much.
Yeah, the last paragraph.
This Kindle that I have doesn't have page numbers, Keith, so.
I've got a Kindle and it's got page numbers, but they're like ridiculous. So 156 is going to be hard. What's the name of the chapter?
It's in the incarnations. It's
Oh.
Buddha.
Oh.
And it's close to the end.
Okay, so we're in the incarnations where Christ comes next.
Yes, right. So
okay.
But we're the line that I'll start with is first is right view to understand the first four noble truths. So if you can find that one. Good morning, Catherine. Good morning, Jim. Good morning. Is that Haima?
Good morning.
Good morning. This
Haima and Swayam.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Jane. And there's Peter Cower.
Yes, good morning, Brother Shankara. How are you?
Namaste, quite well, thank you.
Glad to see it. Beautiful haircut.
Oh, it was done by one of the residents here.
Oh, I thought it was a self-induced punishment.
It was going to be, and I think someone persuaded me that to think better of it and allow someone else to do it.
I think you should try it next time on your own. It can't be any worse. Brother, I'm too much coffee this morning. I'm sorry. Let me get into more Vedanta spirit.
It's quite all right.
No, you look wonderful, actually.
Thank you.
But it's great to see all the support you have among your the people on the call. They looked aghast when I said that, so it was almost
aghast. They were aghast.
Yes.
No, I'm not surprised.
Namaste, Brother Shankara.
Good morning, Haima.
How are you?
Namaste. How are we doing for time? Okay, we'll persist to one more minute. I notice, hello, good morning, Justine. Namaste, Om Namah Shivaya.
Om Namah Shivaya.
Oh, somebody's got a bird singing outside their window.
Yeah, I'm out in the front this morning.
How lovely.
Hi, Brother Shankara.
Good morning, Jenny. Namaste.
Namaste. How are you this morning?
Quite well, thank you.
Good. I didn't quite understand what the readings were going to be like.
Well, let's talk about that separately, okay? Maybe on Sunday.
Oh, sure. Okay. But when is it supposed to happen, though?
Monday.
Oh, Monday. Oh, okay.
It's Memorial Day. It's a Memorial Day.
Okay. All right, great.
Oh, that's good bringing this up. For those of you who haven't signed up and would like to sign up, every Memorial Day for a couple of decades now, the entirety of Swami Vivekananda's complete works, all 9 volumes, is read. It used to be done just by the devotees at the Hollywood Center. Swami and I participated in that for many years. Swami Sarvadevananda has generalized it out to the other centers for which he's responsible. And so if any of you would like to read about 20 pages of Swami Vivekananda's complete works, just send me an email requesting that. It'll take place on Memorial Day, Monday. And you can read it at any time you like. And you will receive a PDF copy of Swami Vivekananda's complete works and a reading assignment, which pages to read. So if you're so moved to do that, please join us on Monday doing that. It creates quite an atmosphere, even though we're not all together. You'll see that all of these thoughts of Vivekananda vibrating in the collective unconscious create quite an effect.
Good morning, Brother Shankara. This is Vijay.
Oh,
Namaste.
good morning, Vijay. Namaste. Okay, here we go. Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavai Tejasvina Vaditamastu Ma Vidvishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May the Divine Being look over us lovingly as a mother and father. May the Divine Being support and nourish us as a mother and father. May we have the strength and skill to study together the art of spirituality. May no misunderstandings arise amongst us. Om, peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all suffering and joyous beings everywhere. So in studying Realizing God, we've taken up Swami Prabhavananda's talk on the Buddha. We're close to the end, although there's quite a bit to go because he's just about to describe the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path, of course, starts with an understanding of the Four Noble Truths. So the first line is, First is right view, to understand the Four Noble Truths. And the reason for that is clear. If you don't understand the Four Noble Truths, then you're not going to be able to see the utility, the usefulness of pursuing the other 7 limbs of the Eightfold Path. Unless you realize that there is suffering, that it is caused by ignorance, that ignorance can be overcome, and that there is a way of peace, you are not ready to follow the way of peace. So those are the Four Noble Truths. There's suffering. It is caused by ignorance. That ignorance can be overcome, and that there is a way of peace. There's a way to overcome the suffering, your ignorance and your suffering. So until you have assimilated those Four Noble Truths, the Buddha is saying, you're not able to go ahead. And you must have longing. Now we know this word longing. It's in every one of the yogas. It's the Sanskrit word is mumukshutvam, and it is absolutely central to Adi Shankaracharya's idea of how to make progress in spiritual life. You must have longing. Swami Prabhavananda in the book Spiritual Heritage of India talks about the longing is born of an ache. First an itch, so to speak, then an ache that cannot be assuaged by anything in a worldly sense. Nothing in the world soothes the ache, and so that ache becomes a longing for knowledge and liberation. And you must have longing, which you will have if you understand that there is suffering, your own suffering and the suffering of others. Second is right aspiration. Right aspiration. This means that your efforts are not for yourself only. You wish to attain bliss and to free yourself from suffering, not for yourself only, but to help others remove the suffering and to live in love and harmony with all beings. Now, this is absolutely central to the Buddha's teachings, that what you're doing in freeing yourself is not just for yourself, that it is instrumental in helping others, not only by the example you set, but by the actions that become reflexive to you in reaching out to and lovingly serving others who are somehow not living in love and harmony. That is, wherever there is any tinge of selfishness, there is no truth of religion. So if you're pursuing the Eightfold Path, you cannot be doing it solely selfishly, just to free yourself. That is, whenever there is any tinge of selfishness, there is no truth of religion. Religion makes you selfless, and you feel for others. There is love. Now, the Swami is using the word love. Most often among Buddhists, the word used is compassion, that Buddha was the compassionate one. But that translates right into, in terms of its active principle, compassion comes from love. So that's why the Swami is using that. Religion makes you selfless, and you feel for others. There is love. So then there's the third of the Eightfold Path. So first was right view. Second, right aspiration. Now third is right speech. That is truthfulness in word, thought, and deed. Now, does that mean you'll be able to do this simply because you've decided to? No. We have a long, long history of mental impressions that are part of our ignorance, that are part of our coping mechanism. And this, in fact, leads us to be a little crooked. Not particularly for those who are well-intentioned and are those following the path, not so much intentionally, but simply because that's how it's been. And so this is where we have to be very attentive. This is why it's brought up as the third principle of the Eightfold Path. Third is right speech, that is truthfulness in word, thought, and deed. As you seek the truth, you have to be truthful. You may say that you can't live in this commercial business world without telling some white lies, but that is not so. You may say that you can't live in this commercial business world without telling some white lies, but that is not so. I have seen one American woman who never told a lie. But Buddha explains truthfulness by this sentence: abstain from lying, slander, abuse, harsh words, and idle talk. So this is much more akin to the yamas than simple, thou shalt not tell a lie. The Buddha explains truthfulness by this sentence: abstain from lying, slander, abuse, harsh words, and idle talk. All of these words, lying, slander, abuse, harsh words, and so on, represent an adversarial way of being in the world. The Eightfold Path, the yamas of Patanjali, the teachings of Narada about truthfulness, which are represented by Sri Ramakrishna very strongly. All of this is to switch us from having an adversarial relationship to the world, that is, in which we think that the world is out to get us and we have to protect ourselves and number one has to come first. All of that self-centered thinking, all of that has to be released from our grasp. And we begin to practice kindness and compassion rather than this adversarial way of being. And because this is such an important point, and it's so subtle in its practice, are there any questions or comments that people would like to make about these first three of the, and most particularly about the third? So the first is right view. You have to understand the Four Noble Truths are truths. The second is right aspiration. You have to desire to be free, not just for yourself, but for all of embodied, all living beings. Now this third is this right speech.
Brother,
Yes.
this is Stephen.
Yes, hello, Stephen.
Yes, I would like to ask you what you said about, this not thinking that the world is out to get you, because for me, I'm thinking about specifically Jesus, and that he was the idea that he was rejected by the world and crucified. And so, at least on the surface, it looks like the world was out to get him.
He deliberately and consciously put himself in the way of that. Stephen, you're right that he flew in the face of what was the accepted way of being for the rabbis and the Pharisees and the scribes of that time, knowing that it would get him killed. So if he had just gone along to get along, the world wouldn't have been out to get him. He would have just been another rabbi. But because he made himself known as a rebel against the status quo, not an armed rebel, which is what Judas wanted of him, but a rebel against the status quo of the spiritual practices of the time. As he said to the Pharisees, you have the keys, but you neither use them nor share them. Shame on you. In other words, you know the truth, but you don't practice it and you don't teach it. So the world was not out to get Jesus until he set himself up, knowing, as we know from his "Please take this cup from my lip, if you will" speech, that he was very aware of what was going to happen to him, and then, of course, all of the unfolding that went on at the Last Supper. Very, very good point, Stephen. If you set yourself up, but none of what the Buddha is saying here, none of what the Buddha is saying is going to set you up. You don't need to tell anybody what you're doing, that you have the right view, that you have the right aspiration, that you're practicing right speech. You just do it. And some people may, particularly as it begins to unfold and you change your behavior, some people may mock you. I'm talking about when I say this world is out to get me. We live in a world that is set up to create producers and consumers. Our economic system depends on your being a producer and a consumer. And if you step outside that, you find that there is some opprobrium. There is some negativity directed toward you. But you don't need to pay it any mind.
Brother
Very good.
Shankara,
Anything else? Yes, dear.
to me, the not being adversarial is just a condition of your own view of the world, and what is in your heart is what you find in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as you have that peace and tranquility within, that's what you'll find.
Yes. Very, very well said. There's this wonderful little story one of the stories printed in the Reader's Digest. They're little, not quite jokes, just anecdotes. A man is working in his yard, and there's a house for sale just down the street. And a car rolls up, and the guy driving the car hops out and says, you know, we're thinking of buying that house. We've taken a look at it. What's it like to live in this neighborhood? And the guy working in his yard says, well, what was it like to live in the neighborhood you just left, that you're leaving? And the guy says, oh, it was terrible. It was just, everybody seemed to be on our case, and it was just, it's one of the reasons we're leaving. And the guy working in the yard said, yeah, you'll find it's pretty much like that around here too. Next day, another car rolls up. Same story. Driver hops out, says, we're thinking about buying that house down here, and says, what's it like to live here? And the man working in his yard asked the same question. And the answer was, oh, it was wonderful where we lived. Well, I'm only having to move because of my work. We're really sorry to leave that neighborhood. It was so wonderful. You know, the people were so great. And the man working in the yard said, well, yeah, I think you'll find it's pretty much the same way here too. And it's just exactly what you said, Jenny. We bring with us our predispositions. And so we create the world that we live in. And if we have an adversarial way of being, the world will be adversarial in return. As you said, if it's the other way around, that you're harmonious and peaceful, and you are practicing right speech, then you'll find that the world is very different. Very good.
Brother Shankara, it's Keith.
Yes, Keith.
I think the tricky part in that is there's so much injustice in the world right now, and it's so evident and so right in your face.
Yeah.
That it is, because in some ways you have to be peaceful, but you also have to be adversarial, in the sense that, and maybe that's the wrong word, but I guess in the sense that you want to see things change and you work for that change.
Yes, you have to allow your righteous anger at the injustice, at the lack of compassion, the lack of social justice and economic justice, turn into action. But never with an angry attitude. It's righteous anger, but it never, and we do what we can. We don't allow ourselves to waste our time being angry about what's happening in Angola, unless we give some money to Doctors Without Borders or to UNICEF or whatever. The situation is remarkably out of kilter in Brazil. What can we do about it? So we focus our attention on what we can change. And the first thing we must change is ourselves. It's a wonder how we're always free to change the world by changing how we see. If we change, the world changes. And Jenny was just pointing that out. But you're right. We must not let our compassion, we must not tuck it away and pretend that things aren't happening that are happening. We need to do things. And this is why when you said it's difficult, yes, it is difficult. This walking the spiritual path is difficult. But the reason that it is what persists over millennia is that it is the more rewarding path. Many of us know the name Hafiz. How many of you know who it was that ruled Persia at the time that Hafiz lived? No, we remember Hafiz. So it's that great love and compassion that pours out even after all these centuries in his poems. You could say the same thing of St. John of the Cross or Rabia or Tukaram. Who of us remembers who ruled the state, the area of India where Tukaram lived? There may be one or more of you who does, but by and large, we remember Tukaram, not who ruled. So it's the ones who walk the narrow way that are remarkable and memorable. Thanks, Keith. That was good.
Brother Shankara?
Yes, Swam.
So as we are trying to progress in the spiritual path and get to a higher state, like self-abnegation, how do we remain compassionate when the ones we are giving compassion to have a way of pushing our buttons, so to speak? If their gunas and our gunas are not dancing in sync, especially when it's people that you interact with on a closer basis, and that sometimes tends to affect your practice itself.
Yes, it will. There's no two ways about it, that those who know how to push our buttons, this is why we practice meditation. What are my buttons? Why are they so easily pushed? But there's no denying that the difficulty of it. But you use the words get to a higher place, self-abnegation and so on. We must remember it is not someplace that we're getting to. It's a matter of uncovering what is already within us. We are covered by these old ways of being and habits. You just called them buttons. The truth of our being, this beautiful, harmonious, glorious, shining being, is covered by these old ways of doing and thinking and speaking. And so as we practice, we see what it is that is an impediment, and we either do or do not let it go. We're better served by letting it go. Just letting the wind carry it away, so to speak. The wind of the breeze of grace will carry it away if we will allow it. But we have to let it go. It can't be carried away if we're holding on to it. So is it difficult? Yes, it's difficult. Is it rewarding? Yes, it's rewarding. Because as you change, you'll find that your relationships with those people who push your buttons changes. I once went to a meeting over at the Soto Zen Center here in Atlanta. And what was being talked about was the results of, by the members of the Soto Zen Center, was the results of their spiritual practice. And one fellow talked about having gone to see his family every Thanksgiving in Florida for years and years and years and years, and how painful it always was. Except this year. And what he pointed out was that he had not been reactive. He had not been party to that pain and suffering that people were inflicting on one another. And so two things happened. First of all, he was a soothing influence in the group without doing anything to be soothing, except just being his new self. And so he was kind of a peacemaker. And he found that people were actually nice to him that hadn't been nice to him. So it's a wonder how we're always free to change the world by changing how we see. Vivekananda says the macrocosm reflects the microcosm. Very good question, Swayam. Just remember, there's nowhere to get to. And self-abnegation is not a goal. Self-abnegation is a state of being that will be natural to you when you let go of those things that are an impediment to being in that state. When you discover them through your spiritual practices and let them go. Release them.
Thank you, Raj.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else?
Brother Shankara, this is Haima.
Yes, Haima.
How are you? It's to follow up of Keith's and your comment, 100% agree. And I know Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change to see the change.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if we don't let go of those people who touch our buttons, in a negative way, it only creates blood pressure for us.
Mm-hmm.
We have to think, feel sorry for them. They are not at the level where you are at. We are in a little bit higher level. I feel pity for those people who cannot treat you with dignity and touch you, push all the buttons. So I feel pity for them. Then that just calms down. That's just my secret for myself.
Okay. The moment we can see that it is compassion we're feeling,
yes,
rather than pity.
Yes, I would say compassion. Yes.
Because pity is downward looking.
Sure. Yeah. Okay.
Saint Francis of Assisi said,
yes,
true love and compassion can only shine from your eyes when you admit that you are capable of any act.
I agree with you. Okay.
So those other people are not at a lower level than us. They are the self just the same as we are.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. You may see this as a spectrum, a horizontal spectrum, or a path. And we may be a bit further down the path than those people. But if we just think, oh, I was there not so long ago. I have learned so much even in this lifetime, not to mention the lifetimes that brought me to this wonderful lifetime. So when we feel compassion for them, when we think, what can I do and be that will make life and their experience of being better for them?
Yes, that's true.
Then we're living the Buddha's teachings,
Okay.
kindness and compassion.
Yes, eventually they will change towards you also. When you show the
Yes.
kindness, like the St. Francis says, where there is hatred, let me sow love.
Yes.
That principle works with those folks.
Yes.
Then eventually,
As you know, as a trained therapist, Haima, that transactional psychology tells us
yes,
that if you change, the other person in the relationship cannot but change.
it will. Eventually, those people will recognize, God, no matter what I say, how much I hurt, that other person is still calm, still in peace, then there must be something. So eventually they'll get it. It may take a long time. Eventually they may get it. So thank you so much for that explanation. That was really nice. Thank you.
I'll give you an example.
Sure.
Years ago in the 50s, Swami Seshananda, who went on to head the Portland Center of the Vedanta Society in Oregon, was serving as an assistant at the Trabuco Monastery in the Santa Ana Mountains. And Swami Prabhavananda would come and, you know, it's the job of the head guy to be an irritant to and make sure that there's improvement in the juniors. And so he would find some reason after breakfast in the morning to go after a Seshananda. And a Seshananda wouldn't turn a hair. He wouldn't respond in the least. He would simply nod his head. And one morning when he left the room and Swami Prabhavananda was still at the table with the others, Swami Prabhavananda said, "What am I going to do with this man? There's nothing to do. He has no ego. There's nothing to attack."
Yes.
That's a true story.
It is. It is the ego that steps in.
And so when we have diminished the reactivity of our ego,
Yes.
then this truthfulness, this third part of the Eightfold Path, is easy. But it's not easy to diminish the effect of our ego. We have to recognize what it is, and so on and so forth. We won't go into all that.
Yes. And sometimes people may never change. It's okay. That's the way they are, and just have to let it go, like you said. That's the best way to deal with it. Thank you so much. Thanks for the chance.
You bet.
I had a comment, two things actually. One about pity versus compassion and what we were just you all were just talking about. Ramana Maharshi was asked, "Master, how shall we treat others?" And he said, "There are no others."
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
And what is he pointing to? What do you say he was pointing to?
The self, and that we're, everything, what you were saying, that St. Francis said, that you only have can have true compassion when you realize that you are capable of any act. And, people who say, "Oh, these horrible people," like for some of us, some people in our government, there's, how can I have compassion for those people? If you say there is no way that under any circumstances I could do what they're doing, then no, you're not going to be able to have compassion, because you're separating. You're saying they're a different animal. They're a different species from me, and they're not.
Exactly.
We're all these little millions of fingers of the divine. But the other thing I wanted to say about the first three steps on the Eightfold Path, that was the original beginning of this conversation, is that I've always thought of number 3, right, speech, as being the point is at which the rubber starts to hit the road, because it's easy in your own head to think that you have right vision or right understanding. It's easy to think in your own head that you have right intention. But it's when you begin to speak and see reactions from the world out there, and see your own, what you're saying, and you're going, "Oh, well, wow, I just said such and such, and that doesn't really match with my right vision and right thought," So it's the point at which we start to really get that reflection on the outside of where we really are at with number 1 and number 2.
Exactly. And this business of Ramana Maharshi, there are no others. Did he mean that there weren't any other people sitting on the floor there? No. He didn't mean that. There were those appearances, just as he was an appearance. But there's only one being. There's only one. There are no others. And so, as you pointed out about St. Francis of Assisi, when we understand that we're capable of any act, and furthermore that what we do affects the rest of the being, not think others, it affects my being and the being that exists everywhere. Einstein once remarked that when anything vibrates right here, the whole universe vibrates, because there is no separation. There is no separation. So when we say something harsh, when we say something rude, when we tell a lie, when we distort reality in some way by being untruthful, or we create a negative vibration by being harsh, slanderous, abusive, it affects, first of all, it affects the self right here, and it affects the self everywhere. The corollary is also true. When we say anything in kindness, in compassion, in love, it is soothing to that which is. If you remember the Star Wars movies, it's called the Force. The Force. And there isn't more than one force. There's just the Force. This has been very good. Anything else from anyone before we move on?
Hello, brother. This is Vani.
Yes, hello, Vani.
So about kindness, I just read a tweet from Paulo Coelho the other day, which was a very different perspective. So the tweet was, don't help others without their permission. Sometimes we want to fix things that they don't consider to be broken. So a lot of times we want to help others, we want to like fix them. We think they have certain bad habits that we want to change, and that causes a lot of friction most of the time. But they probably don't think it's wrong. And as you said, we are all at different stages in our lives. You know, if everybody became perfect, then the world would cease to exist. We all are there, and in that phase of life, we have come through multiple lifetimes, and it's important that everybody is at different stages for the world to continue. So I think
it's absolutely unavoidable.
Exactly. So I think more than trying to fix someone, just accepting the way they are and let natural course to take place and be there when they seek help. I think it's always, more effective when they seek your help and you in turn provide, rather than be trying to force our kindness and say, oh no, let me fix you, let me help you. I'm much further down the road, so it's my duty.
Yes.
Than them willingly coming to you. So I just felt what he tweeted was such a different perspective on kindness, which we don't usually look at, and we always and I think sometimes when we are more spiritual, we also fall into the trap of holier than thou attitude.
Yes.
That also sometimes can lead to friction.
Inevitably. First point, yes, first of all, everything you said is wonderful. First point is the only person, the only one that we can change or fix is ourselves. And when we do change and fix ourselves, we find that the world transforms. The second, to the point that Vani just brought up in this tweet, Swami Prabhavananda said, people have a right to their pain and suffering. Do not try to remove it. Sustain and comfort. In other words, just what Vani said, don't try to fix them. And why do they have a right to their pain and suffering? It's the only way we really learn anything. People have a right to their pain and suffering. Do not try to remove it. But you can act compassionately and kindly. If they need sustenance, you can provide sustenance. If they need comfort, you can provide comfort. Without saying anything about, oh, but if you'd only change, then none of this would happen. Oh, as Vani just pointed out, will that ever fall on deaf ears and simply create friction? And so our right speech must be to sustain and comfort and not criticize. And as you've heard it said from here many times, our habit of judgment, judging others and judging situations, is just a way to keep reality at arm's length. When we've judged it, we've categorized it, we've boxed it up, I know what that is, I don't have to think about it anymore. Finished. Except nothing has changed. And the only thing that can change is your attitude toward that. So when you've categorized it and boxed it up and pushed it away saying, I know what that is, then you don't have to deal with it anymore. And it's you who must deal with it if there's going to be any change. So judgment is one of our bad habits. And it's a way of distracting ourselves so that we don't have to look at the reality that's right in front of us. Which, as has been pointed out by a number of you, is sometimes not pleasant. People pushing our buttons, people being mean to us, people being just completely unrighteous in the world. But when we uncover the truth of ourselves, we find joy and bliss unbounded. And that allows us quite spontaneously to be a comfort to the world without having to say or do anything other than just be ourselves, because we are that shining being, which is so treasured in the world. Though sometimes, as was pointed out by Stephen, if that shining being makes a point of insisting on certain things, they may be brutally murdered. Anything else? All right, what are we doing for time? Okay, it's 11:50. I'll read a little bit more and then see if there are any final comments or questions. The fourth part of the Eightfold Path is right conduct. Buddha emphasizes not hurting any creature in the world, Buddha emphasizes not hurting any creature in the world, thought or deed. He laid great emphasis on that. And let me say, this non-injury is not a negative teaching. Not hurting means to learn to love all as one's own self. We were just talking about there are no others. Not hurting means to learn to love all as one's own self, to see one's own self everywhere, to see the Atman in every being, and to love every being. We can do this. It is a long process, but we can do this. When we find the Atman within ourselves, when we find that living presence within ourselves, then it's easier to see it in other beings. Buddha was invited by a very rich man, but he refused the invitation and went to a prostitute instead in order to dignify her. And her he saw no sinner. This is the exact same thing as Sri Ramakrishna holding a clod of earth in one hand and a gold rupee in the other, and saying, earth, rupee, rupee, earth, earth, rupee, rupee, earth, all the same, and throwing them both in the Ganges. This is not meant to demean the prostitute by saying earth. It means there is no difference. There is no difference. It's a matter of name and form only. Everything is made of consciousness. Everything is consciousness. Fifth is right livelihood. You have to make a living, but you should abstain from any forbidden occupation, such as trading in weapons, dealing in slaves, being a butcher, publican, or poison seller. I would say dope sellers in these days. So this is the Buddha's definition. Right livelihood, you have to abstain from any forbidden occupation. In the Buddha's day, trading in weapons, dealing in slaves, being a butcher, publican, that's a tax person, tax man, or poison seller. I would say dope seller in these days. Sixth is right effort, not allowing distracting thoughts while you sit to pray or meditate, instead to control them. Buddha gives one method, which is also in Patanjali's yoga. In the beginning, watch your mind run after distracting thoughts. Keep watch, be the witness, and then gather the forces of the mind and concentrate. Now I'll add to this. This is a very good practice to just sit and let the mind go before you begin your practice of contemplation, concentration, and meditation. Just watch where it goes and what it does. And one of the things you'll be amazed at, if you do this regularly, if you do this practice for some time, is how absolutely silly the mind is. I mean, the mind is a silly place. So it just does all kinds of silly things and tries to draw silly conclusions, and just it allows you to be a little lighthearted about your mind. And then once you are practicing concentration and meditation, certain things will recur that are less than silly or more than silly. They are the patterns of our daily thinking and behavior that are what was described by Don Juan Matus in those talks that I gave about Don Juan's teachings. They are the components of your membership. And so it bears, when you're practicing contemplation, concentration, meditation, and these things keep coming up, just take a moment and gaze at it. Just gaze at it. Don't interact with it. Don't let it become a train of thought. Just, aha, I see. You are one of the components that is the structure that is keeping me in place. You are one of the things that I must deliberately let go of or make a change in order to move ahead. And the Swami says, be the witness and then gather the forces of the mind and concentrate. And after you've been the witness to whatever it is that you decided to gaze on, then you gather yourself together and go back to your visualization or watching your breath or saying the mantra, whatever it is your form of meditation. So we have just a few minutes left. Is there anything else before we sign off about having come this far in the Eightfold Path?
Hey, Brother Shankara.
Yes.
Thank you all for a very fruitful conversation. And yeah, I just had a couple of quick thoughts. One was on, based on what a lot of people were sharing from the, about dealing with people who push our buttons.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I found to be pretty effective is, using the discernment to, look at the separate the behavior from the person, because just because someone is committing, like for an extreme example, someone like Hitler, right? His behavior was most destructive, but that does not take away from who he is as a being, because he is also one of the self, right? It was the patterns of behavior. So it's kind of like what St. Francis said. It's like, every person is equally capable of committing great, doing great things and also great atrocities. It's just kind of being aware of how we want to choose to use our wills, but really, if you really look at it, separate the behavior from the person, then it's like, it's kind of like, I could condemn the behavior, but while still loving the person with complete sincerity for who they really are. It's like, we're not our behaviors, it's just an experience. It's like the play of, the delusions. So that's something that I find pretty, like that was the first step. And then the second step of that is that, I find that when somebody's pushing my buttons, I first try to pause, and then, when I reflect on it, I sometimes, if they really push my buttons, I'll write them a thank you letter. And, a practice of mine in the morning is, I write a gratitude list, and I try to do 3 different things, completely new things each day. And, it's easy to just kind of say, oh, well, I'm grateful for the nice weather. But, kind of like Jesus said about, there's no real reward in that. It's like putting the reward is in being grateful and loving towards the enemies, right? I kind of paraphrase that. But it's like, yeah, I find out, like, when I put in my gratitude list something like, I don't know, like debt or something that may on the surface seem like a bad thing or push my buttons initially, I find that it's like a very good first step of shifting my experience of it, and I get a lot of freedom from that. So that was kind of a couple of thoughts on, the dealing with people pushing my buttons. It's like, become grateful for them. And sometimes if they really push my buttons, I'll write them a thank you letter. I mean, I don't always read it to them, but I do write it.
Well, that's a very good practice, that practice. And the first part you said, the Christians have an aphorism for hate the sin, love the sinner.
Mm.
You know, abominate the sin, love the sinner. You don't have to tolerate or allow your boundaries to be crossed by the sin, but that doesn't mean you have to exclude the sinner, unless they just are a person that you really find so negative that they just you can't really be with them. Then you have to make an adjustment. But this practice you have of putting down on paper your thoughts about your inner actions and inner reactions, that's extremely beneficial, Liam. Good for you.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Yeah, I hate this and love the sinner. That's a nice way of phrasing that. And then I just have one comment on, I guess it's more of a, maybe like a different, or it's just like a different angle of when you talk about the spiritual path not being easy or being difficult.
Mm-hmm.
I think in a way I don't fully see it that way, in the sense that I think it is actually easy, because like the suffering and the pain is the delusion, right? So that is not the truth. And, you know, at least in my perspective, the truth is superior to the lies, right? The lies cannot exist without the truth. And the truth is the higher reality. But there's a book. It's a kind of like a self-help book called The Compound Effect by this guy Darren Hardy. It's kind of like a Tony Robbins type guy. Mm-hmm. And in it, he talks about, you know, the process of tracking, you know, like tracking what we eat or what we spend to modify behavior. And in that section, what he says, and this is what comes to mind when I think of that comment, is that, you know, he says that, you know, tracking is very easy to do, right? I mean, it's like, well, you know, why? And then he asked, like, well, why don't people do it? And he said that the reason why that people don't do it is because when something is very easy to do, it is equally easy to not do. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I wanted to say is that the path, or like the path, I don't know if I would say it's difficult, but maybe that it's tricky, or it seems difficult because it's easy to do, and it's also equally easy to not do. And that's kind of where the maybe confusion or the trickiness comes into play. So that was just my comment on that.
Very, very good. You know, as Swami Prabhavananda would point out, we have so much effort to give. We can give it to worldly things and get the results of that, or we can give it to spiritual things and get the results of that. Each is equally difficult. You know, it's not easy to build a successful business, for example. And so if you put, you know, 10, 15 years of effort into building a successful business, you'll probably be a millionaire, not billionaire, millionaire. And that's fine, as long as you're righteous about it. But then you're going to die, and that's gone. On the other hand, if you put the same amount of effort into the spiritual path, you will become saintly over that same period of time. You will become a benefit to the world, to yourself and to the world. And you will have sustained yourself as is necessary, of course. But what a difference you are to yourself and to the world. And as Liam pointed out, if we look at it from that point of view, it's not any more difficult than just living in the world would be otherwise. Thank you, Liam. Anyone else?
I just have one comment, Brother Shankara, about
yes,
hate sin and love the sinner. I love it. And we can love the sinner, but if that sinner is completely toxic person, we can love them in our heart, but we don't have to be near them all the time.
Yeah.
Have our boundaries with those sinners, real toxic sinners.
We salute the tiger from across the street.
Exactly. Just wanted to make that comment. That way we can still love them. We will have love in our heart and in our basket. But at the same time, we are keeping them at bay, only like hello, bye, or namaste or something. And that's about it. So that way we will be sane. Other person, we don't know. Whatever it is, what it is.
We're perfectly free to set our boundaries and should.
So much. Thank you for all the wisdom you gave us.
All right, dears. Anything else before we close? This has been wonderful as always. This is what's meant by studying the art of spirituality together. Let us go forward together. So,
Raji,
yes, Bala.
it's such a wonderful discussion today. I really enjoyed it. But I just want to bring in two things. One is even now at Belur Math, they have a practice when they do the Homa, they bring some earth either from a untouchable area or red light area and use it also to perform the Homa.
Mm-hmm.
That is one thing. And regarding the selflessness and, Ramanuja, once he was given the mantra by his guru.
Mm-hmm.
So, and he says, don't tell anybody, you're going to realize moksha. The next thing he does is, if this is going to give me realization or moksha, the first thing I'm going to do is he goes on the top of the hill and he shouts that, if everybody gets moksha, I don't care for my moksha. And that's how the Guru.
That is a great story of Ramanuja. Yes. And it's said to be a true story.
Yes.
Just to be clear, because Balakrishna got his pronouns a little difficult to understand at one point there. Ramanuja's teacher gave him a mantra and said, this mantra is guaranteed to give you moksha, but you must not share it with anybody, otherwise you will go to hell. You will suffer for doing this. Ramanuja went to, there's one story that he goes to the top of a hill, another he goes to the top step of the temple, many steps down, many people in the courtyard or many people at the bottom of the hill, and he shouts out the mantra. Says, this mantra is guaranteed to give you moksha. And what did his master do? His master congratulated him. There's a song called Love Shining Peace. Love's the only gift you're given you can't keep. If you hide it deep inside, it goes to sleep. No, we must share it. We must share the love that we're given. So, thank you, Balaji. Because the pronouns were a little confusing at one point, I thought I'd repeat this story. Anything else? Okay. Satoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya Avir Moiti. O dearly beloved, lead us from thy lesser truth to thy highest truth. Lead us from darkness and ignorance to the brilliance of thy wisdom and love. Lead us from death to immortality. Light us through and through. Light us through and through with thy everlasting shining presence. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace. Peace be unto us and to all beings everywhere. Om Hari Om Tat Sat. So, thank you all for coming. Tomorrow morning at 11 o'clock, Brother Dhruva will speak to us about chapter 12 of the Gita. And I can guarantee you, if you make time for that one, you'll be glad you did. And for those of you who didn't hear before, if you'd like to participate in our reading of Swami Vivekananda's complete works on Monday, just send me an email saying I'd like to participate, and I'll send you a PDF copy of Swamiji's complete works and a reading assignment of about 20 pages to be read on Monday. The world gets exposed to the vibration of Vivekananda's thoughts on Memorial Day this way. It is healthy and uplifting to the world. So if you'd like to participate in that, if you'd like to read 20 pages of Swami Vivekananda's complete works, just send me an email. I'll send you a reading assignment and a PDF copy of the complete works for you to read from.
Brother Shankara, one question about that. What time on Monday will you be doing the reading?
It's at your discretion. Because of the time difference, they start in Hollywood at 9 a.m., which is noon here. So if you want to start concurrent with them, you would start at noon here. But it doesn't make any difference. It goes on all day long. The entire complete works is read at the Hollywood Center that day. The temple is full of people sitting and reading from little booklets that have been created. I know because I did it many years. But Swami Sarvadevananda has very sweetly generalized it to all of the other centers that he's part of. So he sent us some particular assignments. If you send me an email and make the request, I'll send you the complete works as a PDF and your reading assignment, which, as I say, ranges from 17 to 21 pages, something like that.
Thank you.
If there's nothing else,
Thank you.
goodbye, everyone. Jai Shri Guru Maharaj Ki Jai. Durga, Durga, Durga. Go in Mother's benevolent hands with her loving grace. Jai Ma.
Thank you, brother. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brother Shankara.
You
Be
bet.
well, everyone.
Brother Shankara.
Bye-bye all.
Thank you, brother.